Good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are, and welcome to our webinar today, Open PaaS for PHP, How to Launch and Manage Business Critical Apps in the Cloud. We're going to get started with a couple polls in the beginning, just so that we get a sense of who's attending today. So if you could take a moment and answer the polls that we put up on the screen here, we would really appreciate it. So the first poll that's up is for us to get a sense of how many people have actually been using the cloud, and the cloud in terms of infrastructure as a service, so an Amazon or a Rackspace. If you could take a moment and place your answer, that would be great. Just another moment more as we get some more answers coming in here. And here are the answers. So it looks like the majority of you have not yet started using the cloud in terms of playing around with an Amazon, but some have, yes, indeed, started to explore. So about 30% split there, and then some of you who are very, very much using the cloud. Great, thanks for the answers there. And we're going to flip to the next poll. And this is about whether or not you're considering moving a PHP application to the cloud. So the answers are whether or not you already have an existing Zen PHP app that you want to move, or if it's not a Zen PHP app, just a PHP app, or neither. My answers are coming in. Okay, this is very, very good. I think you guys are going to enjoy this webinar, all the folks who said they have a PHP app. Because you'll find out more about what's happening with Zen, as well as those who already have Zen PHP apps. You'll start to understand more how you can deploy it on the cloud. And then we've got one last poll, and that's about what's driving you to consider moving your app to the cloud. We've got a couple answers here. If you could select the one that's most appropriate for you. Just a moment more as the answers come in. And it looks like the most important reasons why are the high availability. So again, you'll enjoy the content of this webinar if that's one of your answers, as well as agility, which we all know the cloud delivers on agility. Great. Well, thanks for answering those. Now I'm going to introduce the panel speaking today. From the RightScale side, we've got Yuri Budnik. He's the director of the ISV Partner Program. And we've also got Claudio Gentile, who's from RightScale, and he's our senior sales engineer. And joining the RightScale team is Kevin Schrader from Zend, who's their technology evangelist. So they'll be taking you through our solution pack that we've launched with Zend today. And we are able to answer your questions during the course of the webinar, so we ask that you use the Q&A chat window to do that. And we've got Andy DeMille, who's our account manager from RightScale, and he'll be answering those questions very handily for you. So please keep them coming, and then we'll do a live Q&A at the end. We really like to answer your questions, and so if we don't get to your question during the course of the webinar, we'll definitely get to it after the webinar and make sure you have an answer. So keep those questions coming. So let's look at what we'll be going through today. First, we'll do an introduction to RightScale to basically lay the foundation in terms of how you can manage an application on the cloud. And then we'll talk about Zend and do an introduction there. And then Claudio and Kevin will do a live demo and show you the solution pack that's running on RightScale for Zend PHP apps. And then we'll open up to a live Q&A. So again, use the Q&A window on GoToWebinar to ask your questions. And with that, I am going to hand it to Yuri Budnik, who will get us started.
Thank you, Elise. So from the polls we did at the beginning of the webinar, I see that there's a few people that are beginning to explore or at the early stages of evaluating the cloud and how they might use it in their business. So because of that, I'm actually going to cover a little bit more there just to give people some context. RightScale is a company that provides a management platform for the servers that you deploy in one or more of these infrastructure as a service clouds. And we've actually been at this for quite a while. We launched about the same time as Amazon's Elastic Compute Cloud. So we've been at this about as long as anybody else has been working on what we now call cloud computing, or more specifically for what we're referring to here, infrastructure as a service. And we're actually running systems at a pretty decent scale, over 2.5, or actually as of today, just short of 2.5 million servers launched and going at an increasing rate. There's a counter on our website where you can keep an eye on if you want to see how many servers we're launching every day and every month. And we are really behind the largest environments that have been launched in the cloud to date. What's interesting about the cloud, and I'm going to go to my next slide over here, is that it gives you access to quite literally disposable hardware. Think of it this way. You got access to now building blocks, servers and storage and the IP networks that connect them together. But it's still up to your IT team to build a working environment out of it. So there's a whole new set of challenges that it represents, because there's a new paradigm on how do you build an environment with servers that come and go with IP addresses that are not static, that you cannot depend on. So the RightScale management platform really enables teams to make it faster and simpler to build and deploy environments in the cloud. And you will actually see this during the demo with Kevin and Claudio as they deploy this open PaaS for PHP in just a few steps. And we also make it dramatically less time-consuming to maintain those environments on the day-to-day, especially as you require high availability. There's not enough time on the demonstration to get into all the ins and outs of ongoing operations, but you will see some of that as well. So we really like this intersection, RightScale, of the storage pools that you have, the servers, and the applications like Zen PHP that you want to run in them. And really the benefits are about making it more transparent and more easy to control the exact nature of the project that you want to deploy, and also for people to not have to begin from scratch. Instead of going through this whole list of benefits, you will see actually the capabilities coming through in the demonstration itself of how you deploy the PHP app. So I would much rather leave the time for Claudio and Kevin that are going to be walking you through it. But there is one thing that I want to mention here, is this idea of server templates that lies at the core of what RightScale is. Instead of deploying images, we deploy a technology that's called server templates, and a useful way to compare them is the difference between a CD and a playlist, say in iTunes. A CD, for example, you can clone it as many times as you want, as you might be able to do with a virtual machine, but all you can do is make exact copies of it. A playlist, you can copy it also, but you can change the order of the songs, you can change what songs are in there, and how they're going to play. That's more analogous to a server template. A server template is sort of the DNA that's going to build a machine once you stand up a virtual server, and you can change that DNA and pass instructions before you do that, and therefore we have this high capability of customizing things and automating environments as they come up. So we have a library of the server templates that lives in RightScale. And what I'm showing you here on the bottom right of my screen, it's a screenshot of the Zen server template that we have in the library. Anybody that wants to run it, it's easy to find it in a catalog. You stand it up in your environment. But what you're going to see here today, that's a heck of a lot more interesting. It's a whole reference architecture that we built together. And that's what you're seeing on your screen here, is your classic three-tier architecture of load balancers, app servers, databases. The major difference here is that this is already built for your use with the combined and joint expertise of Zen and RightScale. As I showed you in the earlier slides, we've been at this for years. We've launched millions of servers. We have customers that are running environments with tens of millions of users. We really know very well how to architect things so they run reliably and so they're able to scale based on load. So when you combine our expertise and our best practices at RightScale with Zen's deep knowledge of everything PHP and how to set up and optimize a service to be the best it can be, you get the benefits of what you see on your screen. So there's the ability here to not have to reinvent the wheel, or if you have a company where you don't have in-house expertise on load balancing, on database replication, on how to recover from database failing and promote your slave to the master, on how to set servers to auto-scale based on load, on the Zen things that you will see about clustering machines, so that even if an app server fails, there's no session data lost and you can continue running without a hiccup. Take all that combined into a single solution pack, which is what we are presenting here, not just with the combined expertise of both companies, but because we sell it together with us supporting it without having to point fingers at each other when you might be trying to troubleshoot something in your system. Now, we made a big deal of the fact that it's an open PaaS. So it's a platform as a service in the sense that it's a reference architecture built for you where you can deploy your PHP code, your database schema. You can be ready to go with relatively very little pain. But unlike a PaaS, you're not locked in. If there's something you want to change about this reference design, like a different type of load balancer, in this case we're running HA proxy, or a different type of database, in the diagram you can see that it's MySQL. Maybe you want to replace that with a NoSQL database. We have the flexibility to allow for those changes to be made. That's where we make the best of both worlds available. You're not going to be seeing a ton of that in the demo itself. We're going to walk you through how the reference architecture operates, but we wanted to mention that we've really been able to bridge this gap of giving you the advantages of a PaaS, meaning the speed that you get out of the standardization of the architecture, without having to compromise on not allowing you to make changes if you need to do that. So now I would like to pass the presentation to Kevin from Zen, that's going to speak to you a little bit about their technology.
Thank you, Yuri. As we're looking at this overall architecture that we're looking at here, this is a little bit of a Zen server in and of itself provides a lot of individual pieces of functionality that are actually quite useful to people who are just normally building out their traditional development, staging, production environment. And so it's built in a manner that allows you to utilize those traditional structures. But as we've been moving more towards the cloud and seeing how the cloud has been impacting not only production but also the development environment, we've been building our software in a way that works well in those kinds of environments. And so what we're looking here at is kind of a basic implementation of what you would see for kind of an overall solution pack that you would provide. We have Zen Studio that's built to work very easily with Zen Server. And inside of Zen Server we have several different feature sets that are quite useful. We have things like application performance, which are things like doing opcode acceleration, caching, and things of that nature. We have the reliability and management features, which are really some of the true sources or the true key features that we have in Zen Server. We'll be taking a little bit of a closer look at some of those a little bit later on, specifically monitoring root cause, and then configuration. We'll take a look at that in the demo a little bit later on. We also have features that are designed to work in a scale-out type of environment. We see that clustering support with Zen Server Cluster Manager. We have the ability to do asynchronous execution, which when you're working in an environment where you don't necessarily have predictable resources, you can look at your system in kind of at a snapshot and say, okay, I have 2 or 3 servers or something like that, but based off of the load your site might be having, you may not have 2 or 3 servers. You may have 10 servers, and so a week down the road. And so having the ability to scale out and do these kinds of things in an asynchronous manner allows you to use the hardware that you're using, or the virtual hardware that you're using, much more effectively. And another thing that's important with the Zen Server platform is the ability to install in multiple different environments. One of the things that RightScale does very well is work with multiple different vendors. And due to the way we've built our installation processes for Zen Server, you have the ability to work with multiple different types of operating systems in a way that's very natural for those types of operating systems. And so that's part of the ability to, when you're trying to easily scale up and scale down a server, the way it used to be was you'd have to build new hardware, you'd have to then install your software, all this kind of other stuff. It would take a while to do. But with the OS specific installation features that we have, It's actually very easy to add Zen Server to an existing cloud type of environment just through the native installation process, and that's something that's actually quite beneficial. If we go to the next slide, we'll take a look at what looks like what are kind of two of the primary features that we have in Zen Server. I look at Zen Server from a kind of a trifecta of primary features. One of them being the Zen Server job queue, which we're not going to be looking at today, but something that's quite useful. But the other two primary features that I typically talk about are event monitoring and code tracing. And what they basically do, they kind of work off of each other, where event monitoring watches for certain things that are happening in your script on a request-by-request basis. In other words, sometimes you have a slow execution request, sometimes there might be some kind of a database error, or there might be something of that nature. And what the event monitoring does is it captures the context of that individual event and allows you to replay it later on in a different environment. The problem is that often that different environment is very different, and that's even more pertinent from the cloud-based perspective, because you're working not even with individual hardware. You're working on virtual machines, and virtual machines that you don't have direct control over. And so being able to replicate what occurred in that production environment is going to be even more difficult as we move to the cloud. And so one of the things that we've done, this is something that works for your traditional deployments as well as for cloud-based deployments, is we've created a feature called code tracing. And what code tracing does is, it in some ways is like a black box flight recorder. When a flight goes down, you don't want to test it by dropping another plane out of the sky and trying things out and trying to replicate the issue, because sometimes there's important data and it's sometimes just not feasible. And so what code tracing does is it takes every single function call from start to finish, includes the parameters, return values, and does it in a hierarchical fashion that you can follow from start to finish. And in many cases, in my own experience, probably 50 to 75%, somewhere in there, 50 to 75% of my own personal experience, I've been able to identify issues without actually having to replicate them. And this is even more important when you're working in a cloud-based environment where discoverability is important. In other words, where you're looking for resources, not defining them. That can be something that's tremendously useful. And also, too, when you have an unknown number of servers that are going to be in your environment. And so this makes it much more easier for you to diagnose issues that are happening in a dynamic environment. Can we move to the next slide, please? And so when we're looking at this, from the kind of the cloud perspective, there's a couple more layers that we need to fill in. But Zend is a PHP company, and we do PHP very well. But there are people who do cloud management and cloud infrastructure very well. And so what we've done here is we've built it in a manner, and our intention is that oops, I just lost my screen. Sorry. The intention is that you can connect in with a lot of the different pieces of functionality that the various cloud services can provide. So you have Zen Studio that has the ability to work directly with various cloud providers. You can install for example, the EC2 management console. If you wanted to do some one-off servers to see what's going on, we have the hookup that's available in there. It's not in there by default, but because we're based off of the Eclipse ecosystem, things like that can be directly installed. When we're talking about the production systems, we have Zen Server, that's obviously available, and with Zen Server Cluster Manager, managing the whole thing. But we're leaving. You see a couple of the gray boxes here, and what those really represent are pieces of functionality that we don't necessarily control, but that we provide mechanisms for connecting into. So, for example, cloud services. We're not building a storage service, we're not building a message queue, data store, or things of that nature, but we're providing means to connect into those. For example, with the Simple Cloud mechanism that we have available in Zen Framework now. Similarly, when we're talking about cloud management, working with somebody like RightScale, we have the hooks that make things available to those cloud management platforms to actually be able to actively manage the system that you're working on. And as we're going to be looking at here in the demo as well, you have the ability to work directly with the cloud infrastructure and be able to see kind of how things are going on. You can see these things going on and how they're affecting your PHP application. There's lots of monitoring and things like that that can take a look at your environment, but very few solutions out there are actually able to actively monitor your PHP application. So from the perspective that we're working within is we have partnerships. We work with people like RightScale to provide that kind of functionality on the infrastructure side, but because we're familiar with PHP, we provide a lot of the functionality that people need to work within a cloud environment. We provide it within the software that we provide there as well. So with that, I would like to invite Claudio back onto the phone here, and we're going to start taking a look at the demonstration that we put together that kind of showcases the whole thing here together.
Thanks for that, Kevin. I appreciate it. Let's go ahead and get started. And before we go into the RightScale dashboard, I want to take a moment and give everyone a quick overview of what the product is and what we go through, and then we'll take a moment to step through the demo. This will be especially helpful for those of you that may not necessarily be familiar with RightScale and the service we offer. So RightScale at its core is a software as a service-based offering that is an abstraction layer above the cloud infrastructure providers that we integrate with, such as Amazon, Rackspace, and even private clouds that are powered by Cloud.com or Eucalyptus cloud management software. And with this software-based offering, we're able to provide an environment that is agnostic of all the cloud providers and gives you things of not only the ability to manage those clouds, but also user-based access control, permissioning, and other security-related functionality within the product, giving you that web-based platform to interact with your providers in that single user interface, completely abstracted from those clouds. So the way we organize our servers that are going to be managed from these cloud providers is really from an organizational hierarchy that starts with deployments. A deployment could be an example or a combination of servers that are used together in a logical grouping for one common use and may be part of a solution overall. A deployment could consist of multiple tiers of servers, such as load balancers, application servers, and your database tier. Each of the individual entities or instances you launch are then identified as servers. And then an extended functionality which we have available, which is called arrays. Arrays are objects that we use to manage auto-scaling of different tiers of instances that are part of your deployment. A common use case for an array that could be scalable would be an application tier that you might be using for your PHP, Java, or Rails application servers. We'll take a dive into one of these deployments now and see as what we've stood up. We can see here that we've actually produced a deployment with multiple servers, and each of them has their individual roles. And now each of these servers is defined within RightScale by its server template. And the server template is really the most interesting part you can look at for RightScale and really allows you to determine where your servers are going to be deployed in and exactly how they're configured so that they can come up in full context. As an example here, we have the Zen PHP application server template, which we'll take a quick look at. You can see it consists of machine images which can be launched and deployed within your cloud providers and are able to be launched across multiple regions, provided you bring those machine images with you. RightScale provides a multitude of machine images to launch into public clouds and private clouds today. The server template itself is really also where the actions take place to provision your server. We have three different types of scripts which are utilized, first being our boot scripts, which are run at provisioning time, and actually build your server in full context with the application or software stack you need, can even go as far as retrieving your application from your own repositories or data store, configure it appropriately, and be able to add it into context within your deployment. Let's say for an application server, that could be added to a load balancer and serve traffic automatically once it's been fully provisioned. We also have tools and scripts available for the lifecycle management of the server, as well as the ability to handle end-of-life for server through our decommission scripts. Now, to build these deployments is very easy once you have the server template available to you, but we really want to take a look at another component offered to us with the reference architecture of the Zen HA Solution Pack. The solution pack that RightScale is offering to our customers, it consists of the Zen PHP platform in two different flavors. One, a single availability isolated mode that is more of a development-based environment that does not have high availability features in its reference architecture. And we also have a high availability solution which allows you to build a larger deployment that's going to actually provide you a layer of high availability. As part of the solution pack, not only are we offering the server templates to provision the cluster manager, application servers, and other resources for there, but we're also going to provide you with a set of macros in RightScale. And what a macro does is allows you to automatically provision an environment that consists of a deployment, servers, and any cloud-specific attributes that you may need to use, such as security groups, firewall settings, or your access tokens. These macros allow you to build out the reference architecture that we're supplying you today. We have a macro over here that we can use to actually build one of the high availability PHP environments, and we'll go ahead and execute this now. With the macro, all you have to bring on are simple settings that you could provide in relation to firewall settings, any access tokens that you may use to access the server itself, and as well as any IP addresses that you may want to assign to things such as your front-end application servers or even the cluster manager. If you don't have some of these settings or security groups already in place, the macro can even go to the point of creating them for you, really giving you an environment that's going to simply require you to bring your application and your database structure along with, and already have the infrastructure and best practices integrated with RightScale to bring your environment up in short order. For this, it could be as simple as us deploying our application, which in this demonstration will actually be using the Magento shopping application that's also available in PHP publicly. So we're going to build an environment that's going to deploy our web application. And this macro has already gone through and created brand new array of servers, the individual servers themselves, and associated the security groups with the appropriate servers. So after executing this, we can go back to our deployments list and see that the MyCart deployment has been produced. We have the reference architecture available to us for the high availability solution that includes one application server, the Zen Cluster Manager server, a MySQL database tier with a master and a slave instance, as well as two load balancers running Apache and HA proxy. To accommodate any additional load, we have a server array available that's going to be able to spin up additional application server instances as load requires them to. And these instances are all being spawned off from the same server template. This is what really allows us to present multiple servers using an identical configuration as needed. These server templates are what are going to be used to rely upon any of the automated tasks that are taking place in terms of provisioning or setup of your instance. Now to save time on this demonstration, we actually have an environment already provisioned using the Zen Solution Pack and is currently running now. If we take a look at the solution right off the bat, we can see at our application tier that there is a series of information being collected at the server level itself. One of the components of RightScale and allows you to control things such as auto-scaling is our monitoring functionality that the product delivers. We can see from some of the monitors that we're collecting, not only do we have system metrics such as processor, drive space, network interface, and memory, but we're also able to take a deep dive into things such as the Apache web server or even the MySQL server to return monitoring metrics. On this server, we have the Apache-based information and can even get some insight into the amount of requests that are being sent to the server over time and render these graphs so that we have an easy-to-use interface to understand our server health and performance overall. Now to control auto-scaling and any other automated actions that take place, we can use the material collected from our monitoring agent to set different conditions that may require different triggers that could be as simple as notification, restarting of a server, or even voting to scale array of like servers. Each individual server will vote in the process to determine whether or not a scaling action needs to take place. These conditions are what's going to be used to actually trigger some of the scaling events. As you can see, we have a few alerts prepared here that are based around processor utilization that will actually be used to determine if the server is under high load or low load and vote to scale accordingly across these servers that are part of the array. As we take a look at the Zen solution pack itself and what it provides, it really does give you multiple layers of high availability and redundancy in order to proceed and keep your environment functional in the event of an outage or individual failure, really removing any single point of failure from the solution overall. Not only do you have master-slave redundancy at the database level, you also have redundancy on the load balancers, so that traffic can be routed and balanced between two front-end endpoints and then routed back to the application servers that you have within the pool. The dedicated server being that individual server to serve as a baseline, and then the array, which is utilized to launch additional instances. We can see that in this environment, there's currently enough load to require multiple servers to be deployed and functional as part of the pool. And within the array information itself, we can look and see that these servers are actively voting based on some of those monitors and triggers that we mentioned earlier. As we take a look at the application, we can see that it's come up rather quickly. In a matter of time of just providing my application code and the database schema and content, we're able to have a fully functional solution that's available to us running Zen PHP. In addition to some of the functionality you'll see here, most of you may be familiar with HA proxy. And you can see that the load balancer itself will continue to function appropriately based on the amount of load the server is or whether it's passed a health check properly. Based on that, the servers would be added and removed from the pool. In combination with the technology of this load balancer and the service offering provided to you by Zen PHP, we're able to preserve additional information and offer a much higher level of functionality. At this point, I believe Kevin is going to come back and speak a little bit about some of the extended features that the Zen PHP solution itself offers today.
Yep, so we're going to take a look at Zen Server Cluster Manager. So we're going to go to the link here, and I'm just taking a look here at Claudio's desktop. What we can see here is a list of individual events that have occurred as well as the individual statuses for these servers. Now, when these servers are actually brought in and registered with Zen Server Cluster Manager, they're automatically licensed based off of the API calls that are made when the machine is actually created. Now, what this happens is that rather than just having the cluster manager run as kind of a command and control kind of a setup where it directs everything and everything is dependent on it. What it really does is more on the lines of provide consistency across your overall domain. So if actually the cluster manager itself goes down, the machines will continue working as they were previously. For things like session clustering is actually managed on the nodes. So if one of those nodes goes down, you still have that backup information on another node somewhere. But if session cluster goes, if the cluster manager goes down, it's not going to affect the nodes that are actually running at that given point in time. So we can take a look at how some of this looks if we take a look at our cluster setup. You see here, again, the individual servers that are available. We can also go in and take a look at individual components that are available in Zen Server. Now, this is being defined across the cluster, so it's not just managing just one individual server. We're actually, if we were to make a change to any one of these, what it would actually do is replicate that change across all the individual machines that are already set up in there. So we also have the same thing goes for individual PHP directives, because one of the things that if you're doing things now in an environment where you're trying to manage your PHP configuration, you may have a GUI of some kind, but so that's not typical. Typically, the way you make a change in PHP directives is you go either to each individual machine, make changes, and restart your PHP, which will typically mean restarting your Apache. Zen Server basically runs on top of Apache on the Linux side, or on top of IaaS on the Windows side, actually IaaS or Apache on the Windows side, but they both use FastCGI on the Windows side, whereas on the Linux side they both use the Apache mod PHP setup. And so when you're actually going to make a change, you either have to restart Apache on each of the individual machines, or if you have some kind of a deployment process, you can push changes out that way. What this does is it actually allows you to manage the configuration options for your PHP environment directly from the GUI here, and it will automatically propagate those changes across all the individual machines, which drastically reduces the amount of time you have to spend actually actively managing your PHP setup when you have to make any kind of configuration change. So we have the ability to take those kinds of tasks and actually move them, allow them to be centralized in one central area. So the next thing we'll take a look at then is rule management. We'll be looking at this as events. These are some of the types of events that the event managers are going to be looking for. So slow query execution, slow request execution, high memory utilization, and this allows you then to set off alerts that can then be used to try and, well, A, it tells you that an issue occurred, and also it gives you the context of an individual event that you can use to then replicate the issue. So we go back to our monitor tab up here, and we go to our events. We see a list of all the individual events that we've been seeing in the course of this load here. We intentionally took an application that was relatively heavy, and also intentionally have the triggers set at a low point so we can see some of the issues here. But when we take a look at this, you can see, for example, the slow request execution. We'll just take a quick look on there. We can see not only that it occurred, we can see which server it occurred on and the count based off of a given aggregate time. We can also see individual get, post, and cookie data, as well as server information that is being passed in. So this is event monitoring. Again, it's a very useful tool. But on top of that, we also have the ability to take code tracing. With code tracing, like I said, is kind of like a black box flight recorder that will record the individual request as it occurred in your production environment, so that you can actually actively follow what happened in that on that machine. This is done using a Flash interface, and so if there's a lot of data to pass in, it can sometimes take a couple of seconds to load up. But here you can see the total request from start to finish. We see the method calls, we see the arguments, and if we take just drop down here a little bit more, we should see return value. Go a little further. Like I said, we chose one that was intentionally had a little bit of heft to it. You can see the return value for the individual method calls as well. So you can go through this and actually see what's going on over the course of that individual request. So that's kind of a quick look at basic functionality at event monitoring and also at code tracing. There was a question that I think I saw that asked about clustering PHP. We see that Zen server manages or handles clustered or basically HA PHP sessions. They're not necessarily clustered. They're highly available, and what that means is that you have a primary and you have a backup copy. And so if your session comes, if a request comes in for an individual session, it'll be stored on the primary machine and the backup machine. And if a request comes in later on and they're load balanced to that same machine, but that machine is down, it'll be load balanced to a different machine, and they'll try and get that from the backup server, which will then the server that they're on will then become the primary, and the backup will kind of remain the same. That's how the clustering of PHP sessions works, but there's a question also on digital assets, like images or user uploaded files. Zen server doesn't specifically address that, though you can use something like the Simple Cloud mechanism. We have the ability to connect in with unstructured file storage off of the several different clouds that we support. So if you wanted to upload that kind of stuff to S3 or something like that, you have the ability to do that. One question that we see here also is code tracing equivalent or similar to Xdebug or Kcache grind. Xdebug and Kcache grind are kind of, Kcache grind does things that are similar. Xdebug does things that are similar, but neither of them are intended for use in a production environment. That's really one of the things that we try to do with code tracing, was make it highly performant, and also do it in a way where you don't have to necessarily have any real security considerations as part of that. And so I don't think that, code tracing in and of itself has a very different focus, whereas, Xdebug, Kcache are really good in a development environment. They are not intended to be run in a production environment. Code tracing is. So that's a quick demo, a quick run-through through Zen Server Cluster Manager. So Claudio, I don't know if you have a couple of questions that we need to address as well.
Certainly, I believe there are some questions that we wanted to review today. And just looking at what we've seen in terms of questions from the customers, there have been some questions around database structure and what can be done with the Zen deployment itself. First being the question around the fact that our solution pack is going to provide MySQL Server. A question from the audience is, do we have the ability to add another database layer or replace the MySQL layer entirely with a database solution of our choosing? The answer is yes. You definitely do have that option available to you. And even within RightScale, we may offer a server template available that is useful for the particular stack that you're looking to use. A great example of that is with MySQL, we offer you the flexibility of both 5.0 and 5.1. And we also offer other database solutions that you can use from our library, such as the Membase solution, which is more of a NoSQL option available to you. Another question has been around failover. And what we can say about failover with our nodes is that we're using a conventional master-slave configuration. With the servers themselves, you can manage the failover process to promote your slave into a master-type instance using a write script that's available to you on the instance. You can then even clone and launch additional servers within your deployment if you need to bring up additional slaves, or simply relaunch those servers or grow to have additional servers in place. Now, Kevin, a question that may be useful for you to answer. In the case of a database failure, do we need to reconfigure anything on the PHP application server or the Zen cluster manager itself?
Well, on the Zen side, hopefully the answer is no. And the reason for that is that you have the ability to set default MySQL username, password, and connection points in PHP. That's typically something that is recommended against to allow your application to do it. But since that is something that's generally managed within the application, you usually don't have to worry about those kinds of things from within Zen Server itself.
Hey, Claudio, this is Yuri here. I want to jump in with a question. Kevin, I'm going to ask you to add some more information after I answer this. The question is Zen Cluster Manager a single point of failure in this deployment? So think back to the diagram. Actually, I'm going to scroll back for the people watching my screen here. Think back to the diagram that you're looking at here. You might notice there's just a single cluster manager. Not being an expert on cluster manager, I'll just say something and then I'll turn it over to Kevin here. If the cluster manager server was not running, the only thing that wouldn't happen is that as new servers came up, they would not be able to handle their session information, the new session information, to other servers to take over that. So it's only a single point of failure in the sense that while that server is down, there would be some reduced capability of the Zen servers to be able to mirror those sessions. But because you're running this stuff in the cloud, you can quickly get an alarm, and within minutes you can be standing up a replacement. Doesn't mean you cannot run both or run two cluster managers at the same time. This was more a cost decision, seeing that the potential problems are rather slight and very quickly solvable. I don't know if I said that properly for you guys, Kevin.
Well, if I were to say it in a very blunt manner, then I could say, yeah, the Zen Server Cluster Manager is a single point of failure, but the only thing that it will actually affect is the active registration and removal of machines from that individual cluster. If Cluster Manager is down, Cluster Manager is down, then session clustering will still actually continue to work in an HA fashion. The only functionality that's actually going to be removed that could affect the infrastructure would be the ability to add additional nodes to the individual cluster or remove them. Session clustering will not be affected. And the other thing that would be affected would be that event monitoring would be down because the events are stored on the cluster manager. Though I would argue that if your cluster manager is down, you have bigger problems than the than individual events being stored. So it's a single point of failure from the point of view of being able to add nodes directly to the cluster. You can still add them to some degree manually, though I would definitely not recommend that. Just because then when you bring that cluster manager back up, there's going to be a whole lot of things that are going to go wrong. But the cluster itself is still going to run. You're just not going to have the aggregate collection of intelligence events, and you're not going to have the ability to add new nodes to the cluster until the cluster manager is back up.
So moving on to the next question, and by the way, for people that have more in-depth or more specific questions, we'll take as many questions as we can during the webinar, but we're very happy to talk to you one-on-one after the webinar itself and really get into the specifics of what you're looking to build in the cloud. So moving on to the next question is, and it's useful that we have the diagram up on the screen, do you support only Amazon Web Services or Rackspace as well as your architecture diagram suggests? The answer is yes, and by the way, we have different levels of complete integration at this current stage as this webinar is being recorded today with different providers. So what you see on the screen is the ones where we can deploy to, and keep in mind that cloud.com is a technology for companies and service providers to be able to build their own private clouds for their own internal use, or to build a private cloud to then have a public offering, as you may. So there's different options there, and for the people that want to know more about that, of course we can help you figure out what would make sense for your needs. By the way, Kevin and Claudia, I know you guys have some questions queued up over there, so I will let you grab one of the next ones.
I see a question from the audience that would be great for me to answer. Is there any way to fail over to different cloud providers? Let's say going from Amazon over to Rackspace. The answer to that is a definite yes. With the server templates that you have available, provided you have a machine image or the cloud credentials to access the cloud, you will be able to deploy those servers onto the different cloud providers based on your own choosing. With the reference architecture we provide, we're rolling everything out onto the Amazon cloud as a starter, but you definitely have the option to change where those servers are being launched, provided you have access into another cloud provider. The scripts themselves would be able to assist you with any failover processes, such as, let's say, a database promotion, or simply provisioning new assets within the new cloud provider if you want to contemplate a full failover of the entire infrastructure.
Claudia, I'm going to grab the next question over here, and Kevin, I'm probably going to pass it to you after this. Okay. Question is, so RightScale doesn't provide cloud hosting services itself, just cloud management tools, right? Absolutely correct. Think about it this way, is Amazon, and generally speaking, infrastructure as a service providers, they're quite literally rent you servers by the hour. So think of those as the building blocks. RightScale is a management system for those servers, as you saw in the demonstration. And RightScale and Zen together have built a reference architecture that makes it easy for you to deploy a PHP app without you having to build everything from scratch and knowing how to get the databases replicating and the load balancers and the auto-scaling working and all those different pieces. That's how all those things stack up together. Kevin, do you have a question you want to tackle next?
Yeah, there's actually a couple of questions coming up here. One of them is, it says here, the Zen server AMIs are more expensive per hour. Does it make sense for a WordPress site to use the more expensive Zen servers or more of the cheaper typical Linux AMIs with mod PHP? The way I would answer things like that is it depends on how important it is for you to A, know that a problem has occurred, and B, have the ability to fix those problems. If you're just doing something for the fun of it, you know, the standard PHP might be something that, or it probably is, you know, something that would work out very well for you. But if it's something that your business is going to be depending on, having the ability to see, having the event collection go on, see the code tracing that's going on, have the ability to automatically and very easily build out an asynchronous execution mechanism actually makes the cost of Zen Server, particularly when you're looking at it on an hourly basis, much more tenable. So it would depend really on what your goals are for what you're using it on, but if you're looking for something that gives you a lot of insight into your environment that you can't really get anywhere else, then absolutely. Another one here is, what practical benefits might a Zen PHP RightScale Cloud bring to a managed e-commerce environment for multiple clients on, say, Magento, which would be, I guess, kind of the example that we have here. When you're working with multiple clients, I think that one of the things that occurs is that you have a fair amount of unpredictability. We've actually seen this with customers who have multiple clients, not necessarily on an e-commerce platform, but on some kind of an application that they're developing. Somehow, somebody has a promo, they fail to tell the hosting provider, and all of a sudden everybody gets slammed. And when you're working with the RightScale Zen combo, what you get is the ability to automatically scale up based on when those events occur. So if somebody accidentally doesn't tell you that they have some kind of a sale going on Monday or Monday morning at 8 a.m., you have the ability to automatically scale. And also, if you make a change that worked with 99 of your customers' shopping carts but failed miserably on that one, you have the ability to go in and see what's actually going on. So it's particularly when you're dealing with things like e-commerce, you're basically, people are spending money or people are making money off of the organization or off of the infrastructure and the environment that you have set up. And having something like a combination of RightScale and Zen together gives you the ability to not only handle those kinds of unpredictable loads, but also has the ability to allow you to really do deep dives into managing any issues that occur. And maintenance is actually one of the big drivers of IT costs. And so we can reduce that by reducing the amount of time it takes for you to diagnose those issues and bring your customer website back up online. I see a couple of other questions here. I don't know, Claudia, do you want to take any? Do you have any other RightScale specific ones?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a very good one right here which I'd like to cover. A question around needing to split or balance PHP codes and resources between servers. Really, you have the ability to deploy your entire application onto dedicated server instances. That being said, unless there's a reason that's going to constitute the separation of your application, perhaps you want to add additional levels of redundancy for different services or back-end components as opposed to your front-facing solution. That could always be contemplated, but is not absolutely necessary. The second part to this question is how can a user upload or change their application code, let's say in the event of an update, and where could that be sourced from? The interesting part about the way the server templates and the management console within RightScale work is that we're providing you a solution where you don't have to bundle your application within your machine image or bring it with you anywhere. You could simply have it residing in your own application code repository, such as Subversion or Git or Visual Source Safe, and be able to retrieve it directly as part of the automated provisioning process of each individual server, sourcing it directly from your repository, or even pushing it up to a static content bucket such as an FTP server or an S3 bucket in Amazon.
So Claudio, let me grab the next question here. The question is, so Zen Cluster Manager and RightScale Platform are actually two separate tools. Correct. What you saw there was Claudio demonstrating the RightScale management platform through the UI, and because there's a cluster manager running within that, you saw Kevin really hitting that on port 80 and accessing all the management tools of the cluster manager there to show you the Zen capabilities that they have. Let me do one more, and Kevin, then I'll ask you to take the next Zen question. Somebody's asking, can we say that macros relate to deployments as server templates relate to servers? Not a great analogy. Let me share perhaps a better way of thinking about that. Server templates is, you might recall the analogy I was showing of a CD, so you can burn as many copies as you want. So a virtual machine, you can clone it as many times as you want, but it'll be an identical clone. Claudio was just talking about, hey, you don't have to actually put in your PHP code and bundle it and save it into an image. That's because a server template, as you boot them up, it runs a series of boot scripts, and those are the ones where the configuration happens. So it's quite literally installing and configuring components as it does that. So the analogy you saw me use was that it's a playlist in iTunes where you can change things and modify things and clone it and make changes as you go. Another one we often use is that it's the DNA that's going to build that server to be what it needs to be. When you saw the macros is a way to encode the configuration, not just of a single machine, but of a whole environment. So when you saw Claudio running that macro, he quite literally, in seconds as you saw, deployed a 3-tier architecture with a full configuration that, frankly took quite a few hours over quite a few days and weeks to build. But once you record it, it's very easy to deploy the whole architecture and to make modifications to it because of the way server templates work before you stand it up. Do I want this running in the US, in Europe, in Japan, in Singapore, changes like that, and others. The macros is something you use when you're first building an environment. Depending on exactly what you're doing, you might not necessarily to be running that on a continuing basis, but it's really useful in that it allows you to record a complete environment configuration, not just single machines. So, Kevin, I'd like to pass it over to you for the next Zen question.
Talking a little bit about what you're talking about there is, I guess you could build a machine that would actually do that, but why in the world would you want to when you can use a macro to set that stuff up? One of the questions here: are there any benefits to Zen Server if your PHP application is not built on Zen Framework? And the absolute is, oh yeah, or the answer is, oh yeah. Zen Server was built in a way where it works with pretty much any kind of a PHP framework out there. It really doesn't care if you're running Zen Framework. There's ways to connect in with Zen Framework to, it kind of has a lot of the same thinking behind it. But Zen Server was built in a way to work with any type of a PHP application. On my own blog, I run WordPress and I run Zen Server on there, partially to get event notifications when errors occur, but also so I have the ability to do asynchronous execution and do behind-the-scenes tasks when people request information off of the site. And so it's really built in a way to work with pretty much any kind of a PHP application. And in fact, in many cases, you can just install Zen Server and throw a PHP application in, and you'll immediately get a performance boost, and you'll immediately start seeing all the places where your code is broken because the event monitoring will catch so much stuff if you weren't programming according to best practices and not being really careful with your code. I've seen that many times when I've worked with customers, is that I've installed Zen Server and they're just flabbergasted by the amount of information that they're actually getting back, and in some cases embarrassed because they didn't realize their code was doing what it was actually doing in the production environment.
Thank you, Kevin. So I'm looking at the time over here, and I see that we're coming to the top of the hour. We still have a few questions that we couldn't get to, but I would like to remind everybody that you're looking at our contact info on your screens, and we are more than happy to have a one-on-one conversation with each of you so we can actually address specifically what you are looking to do. So please reach out to us. I will also like to let you know that this webinar was recorded. If you want to share it with some of your coworkers or other people that you think that will be interested in this, by tomorrow, I believe, we'll have it posted at rightscale.com/webinars, as you can see on your screen. And lastly, I would like to extend to you an invitation to come and see us at our user conference that's happening on June 8th in New York. This actually coincides with the Cloud Expo New York. And if you register for RightScale, I believe you also get a free registration pass to Cloud Expo. And that's an interesting gathering in that we have a lot of customers give presentations on the kind of projects they're running in the cloud and to share their learnings, good and bad, and help the rest of us benefit from what they've empirically realized they can do as a best practice approach on working with the cloud. So with that, I'm bringing this webinar to an end. Thank you for your attendance, and I look forward to speaking to at least some of you in person. Thank you very much. Goodbye.